How's it going, everyone? Nathan coming back at you after a bit of a hiatus here. I don't know what it is with me and August. I think I have, like, in 3 or 4 years of the channel at this point, about 2 combined uploads in August. It's like a curse for me. Every year, so I'm not going to do it. Every year, I end up having a little bit too much fun, a little bit too many, weekend beach visits, a little bit too many mock drafts for fantasy football, a little bit too much. I don't know what it is. I had a fun summer. I'm not going to apologize. I hope you all did too. We are back right into it, right before the DLC drops, which I'm hoping to get into a little bit. We're going to be revisiting it and looking back at the last major change, major shakeup that we saw in Overused with Pokemon Home. More importantly, we're looking at my hilariously bad day 1 tier list. And if you missed this, what happened was I'll just rip off the band-aid here. Here's the tier list. It was awful. We'll get into why a little bit more as the video goes on. But day 1 of Pokemon Home, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but pre-home OU was pretty stagnant. I played that a fair amount, and it's probably the least fun I've had in like a mainline OU in... This is a hot take. I've always held this opinion. I know it's not a popular opinion, but I've liked all of Gen 8 more than pre-home OU, which is odd. And then this came out. It was so fun. It was so fresh. We got all these sick new Pokemon. We loved them. We want to see how they interacted. It wasn't just like old heads like, Heatran or Slowking Galar or whatever, like Gearna, but all these new exciting Pokemon like Ursaluna. Frankly, Regieleki was a new Pokemon when it had ice. All this new stuff, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, there was chaos. Everyone was streaming. There was Lilligans in every second game. It was just utter chaos. And I put out a day 1 tier list thinking like, this is, of course going to be wrong. I'm sure this, I say in the tweet, I'm sure this would age like milk in a few weeks. And I knew it would, but I thought like nobody takes these things seriously. What could go wrong? For comparison, it's like if you look at a Smash Ultimate tier list, and this on the left is Leffen's day 1 tier list, and this on the right is a Smash Ultimate tier list nowadays. And yeah, it's comedic how far off it is. Like Falco, the Belmonts, King K. Rool, Meta Knight, and Pokemon Trainer in the top tier. Diddy is like an S- nowadays, so maybe. But you also got Fox and Cloud and Peach in the C tier. You have Sheik, who I imagine is higher ranked nowadays. Am I mistaken? Am I exposing myself for not knowing anything about Smash Ultimate? Which I really don't, so it's an A-. Okay, so that's fair enough. Anyways, they're objectively funny. Like, they're not supposed to be taken seriously. And I tweeted out, like, not even worrying about it at all. And then this was very much what happened. I mean, I got more traction than any of my tweets ever get in a very bad way. It was, I got absolutely roasted. The tier list got posted to Reddit. Some of the meanest things I've read in my life. I've read in that stupid subreddit like, Nathan's a nice guy, but he doesn't know effing anything about Pokemon. This guy's stupid. He's looking for engagement. Like, I didn't even put this on YouTube. How am I looking for engagement with my 1,000 Twitter followers? Engagement. I'm already getting more defensive than I wanted to be. I apologize. But point is, I got lambasted for these takes. So part of me didn't want to make this video in the first place. Why revisit? Like, I have a pretty thick skin when it comes to YouTube in general. I think you have to when you're making Pokemon YouTube content, because so many people are so weird. But this actually, like, when this happened and I was just getting hate from all sides, this kind of got me in my feelings a little bit. I was a little bit like, geez, that's a bit much. So I didn't want to make this video in the first place, I was thinking. But on the other hand, I was like, you know what? Like, I've already experienced ego death. I've never had this ego of myself as an amazing player or whatever. I just put up my day 1 tier list. As I just explained to you, I don't think it's that serious in the first place. If anybody's genuinely coming at me saying I'm an idiot for their day 1 tier list, I would ask them, what was your day 1 tier list? Because they're all going to look stupid. Like I said with that Leffen thing, Leffen's won 4 Evos for 4 fighting games. He doesn't need to prove his credentials, but his list was idiotic. I'm sure anybody's would too. Mine was probably a little bit more idiotic, like in the margins, probably about 20% more than we can expect. That's totally fair. That's why if you actually look at the comments of this tweet, and we will get into it. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to spend too much time in the preamble of this all, but if you look at the tweet, I was at people who were saying like, this is the worst list ever. I guess spamming the response. Let's see yours. Let's see yours. I knew I would make this video right here today, and I wanted to come back and be like, okay, my list is stupid too, but hey, this person said that Enamorous would be UUBL too. That's probably one of the worst takes I have on my list is UU Enamorous, but I think I have them all saved here. If you look at all of the people who actually did leave me stuff, I think everyone but one had Enamorous. Oh no, 2. Okay, I'm mistaken. Is this the same list twice? It is the same list twice. Well, it was funny. People would leave comments and be like, "This is garbage. Your engagement, babe. Like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen." I'd be like, "Post yours," and they go, let's not get carried away. I got school later. I shouldn't. Like, least obvious bait doesn't respond. Where's someone? There's a couple of really funny ones where people were just like roasting me, and I said post yours, and they just go, let's not get carried away. Anyways, we're not into it. Like I said, I've experienced ego death, so we can I can approach this without fear of being roasted that much more than I already have. The main objective of this video is I posted this. I played OU for a couple more weeks. I did enjoy it, but then I got distracted by monotype. I got back into monotype in a big way. I got into Natdex monotype in a huge way. That dominated my playtime for a while. And then, of course, as I said at the beginning of this video, I haven't been doing anything for the last month. So I know very little about OU beyond like the meta 2 weeks from now. So it's fun for me to check in as a total noob. So that means if you also are in the same position as me, you've been playing a lot of OU lately, we can look at these things pick by pick and talk about what's changed, how they've ended up finding a role in the metagame, what's why they made a disappointed expectations, etc. And if you're a pro, then we can laugh at my picks together. It should be pretty easy. I think I'm going to try. I'm not sure how much time I'm going to put into everything. I don't even need like a 20-minute analysis of, you know, why Pikachu didn't end up, you know, finding a place in the meta or whatever. But there's also some crazy stuff here, like Regieleki and UU completely blew my jorts off. So I'm eager to get into that now from that perspective, from a learning perspective, and we can kind of analyze it, because I do want to play more when the DLC comes out. So I probably need the intel. If we're gonna, I can't be coming up against the, you know, I don't think there's any surprise in OU, but you know, Rillaboom and UU and go, what is he doing here? This is crazy. He doesn't have Grassy Glide yet. What's going on? There's a couple surprises. I mean, like the main one will be, I was stunned, and it was an impetus for this video, that Ursaluna dropped out of OU. I thought, again, I thought it was gonna be banned immediately. And again, if you look at most of these tier lists, this person was on one. Actually, Rash, this whole tier list was actually pretty based on their part. But a lot of people had, you know, Ubers, Lamau, blah, blah, blah. In fact, let's just get into it. I'm doing all this preamble. Let's actually start doing pick by pick here. All right, so we got our handy dandy Photoshop doc here, and I have things on every column here on how they ended up doing, how the predictions worked out. And again, I was gonna do a lot of like, oh, here's the other people who actually managed to leave replies to the tweet when I asked them to post their day one tier list, and let's compare them and see how they did next to me. Because look, guys, I'm not the only one with dumb takes. Like, this idiot thought that Hoopa would be OU. It got downgraded last week. This person thought Samurott would be UU. Who saw that coming? I want to do that, but again, the tone of this video is, I hope it's not going to be too defensive. It's more or so, again, it's like exploratory. Let's look at what's changed, what's not. Let's talk about some stuff, but yeah, I mean, I don't. This is a bad list. It was a bad, of course. That's the whole point. It's a bad list. So I don't need to compare to everyone else, and I didn't even sign up for that. So, anyways, we are gonna go with Regieleki here as the first one. This one was kind of the biggest no-brainer. I think going into Pokemon Home being released, you can maybe anticipate that this Pokemon would be a problem. But it's one of those things where you have to play it a couple times and you go, oh shit. And there's lots of comments on like my tweet too when I ranked it here, where people were saying, what? It's a Regieleki. That thing was no problem last generation. And say, respectfully, have you played against it yet? And they would say no. And I would go, trust me, it's broken. And for those that don't know, Terra Ice gives this thing perfect Volt Beam coverage. It's so fast that can just Volt Switch on everything if you are immune to Volt Switch. And also the ground types in this tier were oddly like weak to this thing in general, because you could be like, oh, well, you just go to like a Swampert and blah, blah, blah. Swampert obviously not much of a presence at that point. Prevalence is what I wanted to say weirdly there. But like very few things could take an HP Ice and not get Volt Switched on. Next up, we have Ursaluna, who I think is definitely one of the most like symbolic gestures of the futility of this whole exercise of a day one tier list, because when you were playing day one home release, this was the biggest problem. I mean, I don't care who you were, nobody was ready for Trick Room into this thing Terra normally facading you. It was just claiming games every time about as consistently and about as unfairly feeling as Regieleki. And so I was so stunned to see like we have, of course, discovered those answers to it. Ursaluna, it's an interesting case where its pros are so crazy. Its bulk is amazing, so you're getting off one hit, like no matter what, it feels like. And its wall breaking is just insanity because if you click the right facade or earthquake, you're guaranteed to get a kill. But it seems it would turn out that the guessing game of that becomes pretty big. If you have like a dirge and a flying type, they can essentially wall you forever. And you are in a time limit in Ursaluna where you have to, it's a huge spikes metagame right now. You of course have to get you're worn down by your burn, but you also have to get up at the burn in the first place. So yes, your bulk is amazing. In such a high tempo game like we have right now, there's a good chance that you might be like burning one of your valuable burn turns to get that up in the first place. So it's one of those cases where its pros are just like these two monsters, like holy cow, it's so good, look how good it is. But the cons are kind of like, they're small, but they add up. So I'll be honest, I'm still surprised to see it drop out of OU. That's stunning to me. This thing, it just, again, this is coming from somebody who was really predominantly played around the launch of home, and to see it just slowly and steadily fall in its use and its viability is stunning to me. But actually, before I actually just go by bit here, we have to get the two lions out of the room here, or the two elephants out of the room, because everyone who's watched this far is going to be shouting at me about two things for sure. That's going to be, of course, Avalugg, and of course, Zamazenta. And I'm actually not even that embarrassed about these, honestly, because again, I didn't take the day one tier list that seriously. Everybody else took it super seriously. And I now know, this is my first apology video. I'm sorry I did not take Pokemon very seriously. It is an extremely serious thing. You are not allowed to be flippant with it. It's a big deal. Don't get it twisted. So yeah, Avalugg, I look at that one, and I'm not going to bail myself out and say it was a joke why I added it. But like, if we go to Avalugg, I just looked at the launch and I said, excuse me, ridiculous physical bulk, great attack with a stab ice attack. Spit F's bad, of course, speed is bad, of course, but I just thought with this thing's bulk and rapid spin and recover and stab ice moves, if this thing was not hampered down by the single worst defensive typing you could concoct in Pokemon, then it would be an easy OU Pokemon. It would be a better Corviknight by far. Like, it's just, it only has like two weaknesses, which is speed and its special defense, but that's easily workaroundable with such a great thing. And also keep in mind that this was before Home came out. This was when the meta was in the clutches of Golden Go. It still is to an extent, but it was just completely consumed by Golden Go, and everyone was desperate. There was rioting on the streets. There was desperation for an answer to Golden Go that would like deal with it long term, beyond like a great task who could kind of deal with it, right? So Avalugg comes in. And I thought if you just burned a Terra on this thing and made it Terra flying, it's just a great hazard remover. Now that's immediately flawed because I just talked about the Golden Go of it all, and this thing matches up pretty poorly against Golden Go, honestly. I think it gets Earthquake. Yeah, sure. So maybe you two would KO it, but I just talked about Spadef being bad. But anyways, I just saw this. I thought if you burn flying, like if we just headcanon this to be a flying Pokemon, it's fantastic. The problem is, of course, that you can take a lot of Pokemon and say, if you just Terra it to XYZ, it's fantastic. Well, yeah, no shit. That's obvious. And it's also worth noting that not only are you burning a Terra for another Pokemon on your team, but in order to take advantage of that in this hypothetical with Avalugg, you need to do that like pretty early on, because if you aren't Terraing this thing early, you're going to be able to use it as a defensive threat that it's described it as. So you want to burn a Terra flying on it pretty early, which also means your opponent is looking at your team and going, like my opponent doesn't have a Terra, I can now like completely counteract them. I don't have to worry about them burning a Terra in a certain thing that would screw me over. So it changes the strategy of the game a lot, and you burn one of your only valuable resources early on in order to get just a better Corviknight when you can just use a Corviknight in the first place. So yeah, it was a silly take for sure, but I threw it out there as like a fun idea, like this could happen. Again, was kind of funnily mentally misunderstanding like the importance of Terra as a resource there, but I don't know. People treated this like this is the stupidest thing in the world. I thought it was like, I threw it out there. Who cares? And the Zamazenta one, I'm not too broken up about, because what happened was I made the list. I threw in Zamazenta crowned, and I didn't really know much about the two of them, honestly. And somebody asked in the comments of the stream, like the last second, like, hey, what about Zamazenta uncrowned? And I went, oh, I mean, it's just like, I never played Ubers before. How does this guy work? Zamazenta uncrowned. Oh, it's just got worse stats than the original, right? I mean, sure, just throw it a couple tiers lower. I didn't put any thought into it, so that was an even stupider idea. This Pokemon is, of course, crazy. Like, one of the better Pokemon in OU right now. And that's after it nearly survives like a suspect test. Like, it was a close thing, and it's still like a top 10 Pokemon. So that was dumb, but like, again, that wasn't like a heavily thought on take. So these were obviously the two silliest parts of the tier list, but I wasn't taking it seriously. I apologize to people who are still upset about the engagement bait on Nathan's part. Moving on, Zamazenta crowned. We did a whole suspect test about it. I don't think we need to relitigate it too much, but you know, it's probably a little bit closer to OU than we thought, but was broken. Magirna, I don't know if there was any world this thing was gonna be OU. This thing was just, I think it would, if you allowed Magirna into the tier tomorrow and you said, there's a complex ban on Magirna, it can't terror stabilize like the rest of the cast can, I still think it would be instantly banned, so broken. But then you add Terra onto this immensely flexible, great move pool Pokemon, it just seems ridiculous to me. And Sneasler is another case where I'm like, we sure? Like, we sure we don't want to ban this guy? And for me, it's just down to Dire Claw. This Pokemon, this move is just so silly and ridiculous. I'm sure I don't have to, you know, sing its praises to anyone else. But also at launch, I was just looking at its move pool and I thought like, okay, it's just better Howlucha with the most insane RNG moves thing we've ever seen in our lives. Like, what is, of course it's Uber. I didn't even give it any thought at the time. Of course, what we've learned is that even though it is like kind of similar, I guess, again to Ursaluna, even though the pros of this thing and like the advantages that it provides are ridiculous, it's just got a little bit more counters than we thought. It's not that similar to Ursaluna, but of course, you can only use it once as an unburdened sweeper. Like once you burn that thing, it's only down to a measly, terrible 120 speed tier. But it kind of struggles against common enough counters and Toxapex and Skeledirge and Golden Go, even Zapdos. Don't worry, my Zapdos take was terrible. We'll get back to that. So yeah, Sneasler ended up being just not quite as good as we thought with the Uber stuff. And I would still argue Dire Claw is pretty stupid, but it's got enough counters that it's definitely not an easy Uber ban, just a very good OU Pokemon. And I guess before we go any further into OU, actually, I'm also going to skip ahead again here. And I want to talk about these 3 defensive flying types that we see here, right? Because, look, once again, if you want to be mad at me about these 2 dumb takes, that's fine. I didn't take them that seriously in the first place, so I don't really care that I'm wrong. But these 3, I do think is my biggest miss on this tier list by far. This general niche, and you can kind of count Landorus, Therian, a little bit, of just defensive flying types, I thought would have a huge fall off. And the reason for that was that, of course, these Pokemon lost Defog. And we're in this, again, to flash back to pre-home days, we are in this just chokehold of a tier where there's any hatch controls appreciated. And these Pokemon come in and they lose that valuable thing that made them so anticipated. They lose Defog. And so I thought, you know, you look at these Pokemon and they're good defensively, but they don't have that, like, you know, uber defensive niche like a Toxapex or like a Skeledirge, where they just have like outstanding bulk, outstanding recovery, great specific utility in what they do. Toxapex provides toxic spikes and haze. Skeledirge is unaware. In a hyper offense tier where there's so much like ridiculous boosting, ridiculous offense, those 2 seem well suited to it. Or these Pokemon who are frankly like 12 generations old at this point, these 2 in particular, I thought they can't keep up. You know, it'd be one thing if they had Defog and they had that specific like niche and utility providing, but now they're just defensive Pokemon. And then offensively, I also thought like, what is this like? What? There's so many better offensive Pokemon nowadays. Like 120 special attack is fine, but it's not anything to hang your hat on. Its speed tier is not great either. I don't think we're gonna see it in like dominating in rain teams like we used to before. And I just thought, yeah, offensively, why would I use this over like an Iron Valiant who's got a million times the special attack stats? Also great move pool in terms of like plurality. They can be a mixed attacker. Like, I just didn't think they would hang. And of course, I was wrong in both extents. I think if I had to boil it down to one thing, what I was wrong about, it's that. No, actually, I'm not going to boil it down to one thing. We're going to be a little bit more nuanced. The bigger thing I think is just there was a defensive niche for them. I think that I did not see the defensive niche if they don't have Defog. I thought, what do they really provide? But it turns out just being a defensive flying type that disincentivizes contact, and you're also fast, so you can actually like threaten with Hurricane, is extremely good. Like that's just on a basic level. In a metagame where fighting types are extremely prevalent and extremely common, having a good physically defensive flying type is just valuable. And again, disincentivizing contact with the 2 of them in static, but also in burn. And also take a second to say that, you know, if you had told me like 10 minutes after I dropped this tier list, like that Zapdos was a top 10 OU Pokemon, I'd be like, wow, that's surprising, but like, you know, it's Zapdos. Sure, I can buy it. But if you also told me Moltres was like a solid OU Pokemon, I'd be stunned. I'd be like, Moltres? But they say Moltres were, what? I guess Flame Body is that much better than Static, but at the time I would have been like, there's no way you're serious, right? But yeah, even offensively, I think if these Pokemon were much better than they give them credit for, just because again, flying types are really appreciated right now. It's as simple as that. And Landorus, you know, my opinion at the time was I think Landorus is going to be OU. I wasn't dumb enough to say it wouldn't be OU, but I thought it was going to fall off in like 6 to 9 months, and that could still come to pass, I suppose. In which case, it'll look like a genius. But I'm going to undo that potential reality by saying right now that like a week or two, when I was like, no, Landorus has still got a bit of sauce. It's a little bit more like, it's not this do-it-all mon. Like it is eaten into, its role is eaten into a little bit by the presence of Great Tusk. But there's still like a lot of room and a lot of potential for Landorus. So I guess if I had to sum up what I was wrong about these 4 Pokemon in general, is I just didn't see a room in this power crept meta game for just kind of general pivots. Not necessarily like hyper defensive or hyper offensive, but just kind of like a good solid all around pivot. I didn't quite see the niche for it at the time. And what I would say now is, well, it's one thing when those pivots happen to match up excellently against the metagame, which if I can defend myself a little bit, it's hard to predict how things are going to like mesh in a metagame that far out. But also when you're in a metagame that is hyper power crept, you can go into a Zapdos on like a Ceaseless Edge, and then you can pivot out, force a swap on their part, and then you can get one of those ultra offensive Pokemon in on your side. You know, you can follow it up that way. So yeah, that was the thing I think where I missed the biggest, and I guess it just kind of goes to show that just because you're in a hyper offensive metagame doesn't mean there's not a role for these pivots. They can actually just help hyper offensive Pokemon do their job even better. And that's where balanced playstyles really come into play, where you have a plurality of roles. Instead of just having 6 hyper offensive Pokemon, you can actually just have a team that lets 2 hyper offensive Pokemon do their jobs better. So yeah, a lot of interesting things to learn there. We'll look at OU though in general. We're already like pretty deep into the recording here. I was hoping to go like deep into pick by pick here. I don't think I'll do this. It's a little bit long in the tooth already, but you know, Heatran, Slowking, Galar. I don't think many people would be stunned to see these Pokemon do as well they did. Samurott, this is where I'll put my back up a little bit actually and be like, you know, people have already been like, everyone knew Samurott would be good at launch. It was obvious. Ceaseless Edge is so broken. Everyone saw that move and thought it would be ridiculous. Come on, there's no way that anyone with a brain thought it would be bad. Well, first of all, if you look at those tier lists I sampled from other people on day 1 too, a lot of people said it wouldn't be OU. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of a pat on the back about that. But also, like, it was a slow Pokemon. It was a water type. Its stats are good, but nothing overwhelming at the time. I don't think it was utterly obvious that this Pokemon would become the really important threat that it is today. My thought at the time, honestly, the bigger thought was just the matchup with the Golden Go. Because again, we were in this place. I thought this Pokemon's got a great defensive typing to answer Golden Go. You come in, you drop a Ceaseless Edge that is threatening to kill, and then you actually get up a spike at the same time. That's ridiculous. And I think it's probably a large part of the reason why it is so broken right now. And yeah, we'll go to Cleavor, which is probably another one of my worst takes on this. But even at the time I said with Cleavor, I said there are 2 worlds with Cleavor. One, here's what I said at the time. I said, if I had a crystal ball and I could look into the future, and if I could be like, is Golden Go as extremely prevalent and hard to counter in 3 months' time as it is right now? If the answer is yes, then Cleavor will be good. Because Cleavor can come in, it can threaten to defog. It's 1 base speed faster than Golden Go. And with sharpness, it can come close to OHKOing Golden Go with a Night Slash, which is huge. So you can threaten the Pokemon out, you can get defog, and if you don't have any hazards to defog, you can actually put your own hazards in the field with an extremely powerful Stone Axe. I thought like it's a very specific niche, but we were in a metagame at that point already, which saw, you know, Great Tusk have 60% usage just because it was like some semblance of an answer to Golden Go. And of course, this Pokemon can't swap into Golden Go whatsoever, making it kind of mediocre counter, more of a check if anything. But you can say the same thing about Great Tusk at the time, right? So that was kind of my thought around it. I'm surprised because Golden Go, it's not as dominant, but it is still like a big force. So I thought it would have a little bit more usage as an anti-Golden Go force. But I guess by that token, why would you ever do that when you can just do objectively better Pokemon in Samurott here? So if Golden Go was a little bit better and Samurott wasn't the metagame, I think this would actually age decently well. But as it doesn't really have a place. Urshifu Rapid Strike, one of those things where I don't think we realized how good Sword Stance would be. We were like a week into it where people were like, hold on, like we got to start putting it out there that Urshifu is kind of insane. So not ultimately surprising it was banned. Landorus already addressed that. I thought it was gonna be super mid when it lost all its utility at the time, but Intimidate, that typing, flying typing, again, being important, quite good. Yeah, that was a silly take. Volcanion, I think this is wrong. Let me do this on the fly here. It is UU. That does surprise me. What happened? You know, reading this list right now, and it's in the same viability tier as like Azumarill, Corviknight, and Cresselia, who are OU. Skeledirge. I just think it's one of those things where you got power crept out. Whoops, there's my background. Hope y'all like some Bioshock. I think it's kind of got power crept out of the metagame a little bit, and I think it's fine. I think viability wise, obviously it can hang. There can only be so many Pokemon that fit in the tier. Basque Legion lost last respects. Now we can get into UU here. I'm gonna try to speed this up a little bit here. Enamorus, I was super wrong on. I just underestimated how good 135 base power Moonblast with good coverage would be and good speed here. But I was pretty open about that when I was doing lives after the fact with Joey and stuff. We were both pretty wrong with this Pokemon and realized, holy shit, this thing's really good. Zamazenta, again, taking that seriously. I think I kind of nailed these ones. They're really good, but don't have quite the same spot that we thought they would. Hoopa is one, like, it could have been OU, and it obviously was for a long time. I wouldn't have been surprised, but I guess just a case of like, there's so many good offensive Pokemon. You got to really be dominant in order to make it work. But I am still a little surprised to see it drop despite having ranked it this way day one. I think that was my thinking at the time. Decidueye just wasn't strong or fast enough. Next, we are going to go to RU, where I was right with a couple. Chestnut, I'm mad at myself for, because like Death, Taxes, and Chestnut being UU, man. Like, no matter what, it's just having a good defensive mon with spikes is just relevant, I guess. I should just stop sleeping on it. That's so funny to me. Lilligant is an interesting one because I saw it on release and I thought this Pokemon is completely walled by Golden Go. And again, on Pokemon Home day one release date, I faced so many of these things and I didn't have any trouble against any of them because I would always have a Golden Go for it as an answer because it so struggles against Golden Go. And then of course, it doesn't answer the obvious question, but like, what about UU? Like, you can still do its stuff in other tiers. And of course, now we see that it is in UUBL, and that means it's just like as good as it can be without having to compete with Golden Go, I guess is one way to think of it. But funny to see. Tornadus I was super wrong on too. I think a lot of people had it penciled in for OU though. So I guess I was wrong. I was right that it would be worse, but again, my whole idea of the niche of defensive flying types is super wrong. Once again, Mulch just stunts me. Didn't realize how good you be defensively. You are a terror in monotype. And Hoopa, man, I looked at you on release. I thought just like, there's so much good going for you offensively, but you'd never be in a highly tiered. We're getting to the point where like, I've never played RU super seriously. I probably haven't in the past. I don't know anything about it now. I don't know why I would profess to talk about the RU tier and why this thing doesn't fit in it, but I just always, in my mind, I always like this thing's smoke on page. And I think like, how is it underperforming? And there's no pursuit this generation. Like I almost put it in UU like when I was doing this day one tier list. I remember that. And then NU or lower, I thought would be a lot of like easy ones here. I went to put the ones that ended up being an RU instead because it's just like a slight difference. But Regidrago is a really interesting one. Regidrago, again, I don't profess to know too much about UU, but I guess it's just a similar situation where Terra lets you boost your ridiculous offense even crazier. In a similar situation to Regieleki, it makes your obvious counters not so easy counters, gives you a bit of an extra better move pool with Terra Blast. You know, I'm looking at the UU viability list right here, and it's ranked alongside Pokemon like Thundurus and Wo-Chien and Slitherwing, who are RU instead of UU. So it seems like it's on that precipice anyway. So I was a little bit lower on it than necessary, like 1.5 tiers, I guess, but fair enough. Rillaboom, meanwhile, is also in UU and much more of a consistent threat, it seems like. And yeah, my thought at the time was that I just remember pre-Grassy Glide Rillaboom last generation was so ass, and everyone was trying to make it work because they liked the Pokemon, but it never did anything. But this is, I'm not going to profess to know anything myself. Let's just read this description from the viability forums right here. It's a really interesting post for those that don't know either. It's really great because of how good grassy terrain is in enabling other Pokemon. Providing recovery for stuff like Goodra and Tinkaton is great on top of weakening EQ from Donphan and Iron Treads, makes it easier to switch into them. It's easier to pair with other offensive grass types, mainly Breloom and Iron Leaves, to make them way more threatening. The big one is obviously Hawlucha with Grassy Seed. I think it's really good right now, and it would be opposed to that rise in the list too. Choice Band is actually a powerful wall breaker, not surprising, honestly. It can also have a lot of versatility with Taunt through Protect, Sub, and SD. So cool. I didn't know that. That's very interesting to see. Next, we got Enamorus. 135 base power, Moonblast is strong. Same thing as here, as is here. I don't think anybody in the world saw Cresselia its setup test being as good as it was. I don't think anybody was like, oh yeah, pencil in Cresselia for OU. Maybe people had an UU or RU, but being as amazing of a Terra abuser and amazing of a as a stored power user as it's ended up being, I don't think anyone really saw that coming, to be honest. Now Muck here, you know, I've been looking through the forums, looking at the Smogon page. I'm trying to find a reason why this Pokemon is UU nowadays, and I'm not finding like an explicit description explaining why. But I guess we just look at the viability rankings in UU right now, and I see a lot of offensive ghost types, offensive dark types. I see a psychic type here. I see a lot of grass types. And I guess we just chalk it up to like good matchups here. So sure, I guess we'll keep Muck there. And then I don't know if anything else is too big of a change here from their actual rankings that we need to address it, honestly. So let's get it there. I've been editing around this video a little bit, so I don't know how long it is, but I certainly know it's longer than I want it to be going in. I probably will not check the comments on this because, like I said, I've experienced ego death from the blowback, from the rage induced by this one here, but I may just take it a little bit safe on this one to begin with. But I do hope to start uploading a little bit more frequently than I have in the last month, so make sure to let me know what you guys want to see below. There's gonna be some new meta stuff. Put out a poll recently asking you guys want to see me do OU or monotype or AA or whatever, and there's kind of a split thing there, so I guess I'll just do whatever I want to do there since there's no consensus on it. So yeah, expect me to be playing a lot of stuff and figuring out what I like in the coming days, and I'll catch you next time. Take it easy.